welcome to the My Name is Human Earth2.io podcast, brought to you by E2.news. My name is I Am Batman.
And my name is Human Kangy. How's it going today, Batman?
Doing good. I'm wreaking havoc on the world. I'm going to save the world from the Joker.
Did you?
So
did you dispatch with Hazy for this episode? Are we gonna? We'll figure that out later, I suppose. But all right, I'm talking to Batman.
I am Batman. All right, and we do have a special guest on this episode. We have Sean the Bull Combo, a popular Earth2.io YouTuber. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
And so I just want to ask a few questions. How did you find out about Earth2? When did you get started?
Well, I found out about Earth2 in mid-December. I believe I came across a Facebook ad for it, which I think is how some of the early adopters got in on it. But I got in on December 18th was when I made my first purchase. And the rest is sort of E2 history.
And what kind of intrigued you about the project? What was your interest in it?
Well, first off, I mean, I'd be lying if I said the idea of a virtual world resembling Ready Player One wasn't intriguing, because it definitely was intriguing. So they had my interest peaked from the get-go. But I think just the whole concept of it, virtual land, tied a one-to-one geographical link to the planet. A lot of that was just really interesting to me. And real estate's something that I've been wanting to get my feet wet with a lot recently, and it kind of was an opportunity to get that experience in a different way, so in a different medium. So
cool. So what do you do on Earth 1 when you're not playing Earth 2 and recording YouTube content?
I'm a pretty busy guy, actually. I have quite a few hobbies. I have a day-to-day job. I'm a senior support engineer for a pretty large tech company, so that's kind of my 9 to 5. And then I do the YouTube stuff. I also run a video production company that does like commercials and music videos, stuff like that. And then I also record a lot of music. I play guitar in a band. I like to produce a lot of my own music at home. And then I have a bunch of other interests, fish tanks and sports and gaming and everything in between. So yeah, I have a lot of stuff I enjoy.
That is definitely a busy life. So so you were doing YouTube before you came to Earth?
I was, yeah. I started, I posted my first video about 9 years ago, and then started getting more consistent with it about five years ago.
And when you started playing Earth 2, did you know right away you were going to start doing content?
I didn't. Actually, I was, I try to be transparent and I try not to mislead people in my videos and stuff like that. So I really wanted to be as confident in the platform as I could be before introducing, my subscribers to it or anything like that. So I definitely waited a couple weeks before I made my first video on it. I kind of got used to the community, got used to the platform, made sure everything kind of made sense, and checked out. And but pretty early on, I realized it had some potential, and I thought that there was the possibility I might do it. So I'm glad it worked out like that.
So on that topic, I do want to ask really quick, what was the time span between you seeing your first Earth 2 advertisement and actually deciding to buy land? Because it took me about a week to pull the trigger. So whereas it took it took Batman about, I think, 20 minutes.
I think it took me about a day, actually. So about 24 hours. I work on a computer. By default, I'm on a computer most of the day. So I have a unique opportunity to kind of research things for an extended period of time. So I did a bunch of research into it for pretty much that entire day. Definitely went and checked out what some other early YouTubers were talking about and seeing their opinions on it. Went to the community, kind of just checked it out. And about 24 hours later, I felt confident enough to put $60 into it just to start and see what would happen. And then obviously it, like everyone else, it kind of avalanches from there. But about 24 hours.
Oh yeah, I put $200 in the first day, and a month later, I'm 15 grand deep.
I think we all have similar stories. It's a steamroll effect. You find one more thing that interests you, and then you realize that you have completely neglected this certain type of land and then this certain location, and it's a whole thing.
Oh yeah, got to get resources, got to get
Exactly.
mega cities. Yeah.
There's always the next trend.
Right. Yeah. There's always AfterEarth.
Yeah.
We can get to that later, though.
Well, maybe that's you brought up AfterEarth, so maybe this is a good transition into our first topic of the day, if everybody's ready for it. Let's talk about whether or not you think E2 is undervalued. So, kind of jumping into this feet first, we've seen some of the other names in this space have all of their land purchased up, or actually not really have their land available to the general public. So you can really only get land for things like Decentraland or the Sandbox or My Neighbor Alice through these third-party markets for usually pretty high dollar amounts. And also in some cases, we're talking about other companies that are a bit ahead of Earth 2 technologically and graphically. So, I think that's really sort of the preface for the question of what Earth 2's true value is compared to some of these other competitors in this space, especially when you're talking about, the exclusivity and the supply of the land. And I'm sorry, yeah. I should have really kicked that to somebody specific, and I just let dead air happen. So that's on me. So you know what? We'll go combo. Let's start with you on this question, because I know this is something that's interesting to you.
Yeah, for sure. So I do think that Earth 2 is in a very unique spot because there is land still available, but their end result, their end goal is still very much in line with some of these other platforms that we've already seen sell out. So from that perspective, I do think that if Earth 2 can fulfill their goals and hit this vision that they have, I do really think that Earth 2 is extremely undervalued right now, because it would be the last viable platform out there that isn't all bought up, that isn't being sold for an extremely high marked up rate. Now, that's not to say the tile prices won't increase, because obviously they will as popularity goes up. And while there's an argument to be made, I think that the large amount of tiles creates a conflict when it comes to limited supply, which is always something that you want with anything for value to go up. But I do think at the same time, the rising tile prices, I think the way everything scales, I think it's set up very well to have the potential to be successful, again, if they can fulfill their goals. Now, I mean, there's a lot to say in between now and then, and we've already seen a few hiccups along the way, I should say. So,
yeah,
I think the jury's still out there, but I do think there's an argument to be made that there is some hidden value still there to be discovered.
Well, I think that one thing that's been really interesting about Earth 2's approach is the way that you can kind of see the pricing model and how it affects the buyer appetite. Because back in December, when you were getting into this combo, your first purchase was mid-December. Prices for the USA at that point were probably, I'm guessing, around like $2. Yep. And there were tons of arguments on the E2 official Discord about whether or not America was already overvalued. Well, now we've seen that that pricing crawl up above $50 per tile. So I think that that's a really interesting example. It's very specific, but it does allow you to view some of those other nations that are still well under $1. If Hazy was here, he's unfortunately been replaced with Batman, but if Hazy was here, he'd be able to tell you about Armenia and that price. And so I think that, seeing this sort of play out over the last 3 to 4 months could definitely indicate that it is undervalued, especially when you're trying to kind of compartmentalize some of the different nations and tiles that are available.
Yeah, and our good friend Walker, Earth 2 Odyssey, he talked about the limited supply actually kind of working hand in hand with the pricing model, because when we get to class 4 and we get to class 5, the price of the tiles is going to be so high that it's just going to people are going to stop buying the tiles. So therefore, you might only see 1 million United States tiles sold, period. And so if there's only 1 million tiles sold in all of the United States, then you kind of have your exclusivity for that country. and that'll kind of apply to other countries as they start to sell more tiles. Eventually, you're going to have a cap.
That's a very good point.
Yep.
Yeah, the pricing model sort of naturally will create this sort of exclusivity, and there is that $50 billion or 50 billion tile cap that's set out there too.
I don't think we'll ever get close to that.
I think that you'd have to run the numbers and break that down between every nation to see what the tile cost would be and if that's feasible. But I think you're probably right. That's a hard number to reach. But still, we've got a lot of cheap tiles out there.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting to watch the tile values change like this and to watch the buying habits change because, like you mentioned, yeah, I do think there will be a point where people will stop buying tiles, at least regular people. But there may be a point where we see the only tiles being purchased are by larger corporations or larger companies for specific reasons or specific purposes. So I think that kind of ties into why the devs have said several times that they don't anticipate lit being a long-term thing. And I think obviously a lot of people latch on to lit as being like this awesome source of revenue, and it is in some instances, but as tile purchases slow down, that's going to stop too. So other sources of revenue will be key.
Yeah. And the thing I'm really curious about is how base tiles kind of work into this equation. That's really, how cheap are they going to be, and what benefit are those tiles going to have, and are they going to be is a base tile, can you buy a base tile in New York City for the same price that you could in Wyoming? Really understanding how they're going to implement that's going to be really important, I think.
Yeah, that's a solid point. And it kind of makes me think of like the housing market, how there's a pricing difference between buying a house that's pre-owned and a fresh build. There's obviously a large price gap when you go in and buy something brand new. And I think that just also that highlights how there's always going to be people that are willing to do that. So I just think that their intent will change as the game goes on. I think it'll be less people buying here and buying there randomly and more corporations or people coming in with a specific purpose to buy a specific plot. So that'll be interesting to watch as time goes on.
Right. If there's a little bit more sort of corporate awareness, then, I think an easy example would be somebody seeking to buy their own, building, for instance, their own headquarters. And we're probably just not quite seeing a whole lot of that yet because there's not been that, huge push from Shane and the team to advertise in that way. But it'd be very exciting if we start to see that. And who knows, we may already be seeing some users that are, representing a larger company, but they're just not necessarily willing to disclose that info publicly because there's some serious whales out there. So who knows?
That's true.
I am back.
the greatest whale of them all, building Armenia Vegas. But yeah, I think that one thing I have been thinking about from a value standpoint, especially when we're talking about some of the competitors, is ultimately what's really going to matter is the end product, especially considering that Earth 2 is it is a video game, right? There's going to be those gameplay components. And so I think if it succeeds in those regards and it's a fun game, then the rest will follow. So I hope, and I'm sure that vision's really being kept in mind because I see some of the competitors and there's a lot of emphasis on things like, we'll jump into it a bit later, but I don't want to scoop our own podcast here, but yeah, ultimately I really do think that that's what we're working towards, right? Everything in the interim is sort of things to keep us occupied and things to keep us busy and not necessarily pounding Shane's door down for a game. But
yes,
yeah, which is what I want to be doing. Well,
seems a lot of people in Discord want to be doing that too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and I've written articles, and we talked about it last week, actually, about whether they want to be patient or not. But, one of the things that will give something for people to do is building buildings. Building properties that kind of expand the tiles more than just being a tile. And that's something I'm actually really excited about. But how are they going to do it? That's kind of the question we've kind of all been wondering. Is it going to be a 3D modeler engine? Is it going to be a third-party integration? My hope is it's something that everyone can do, that you don't need a degree in programming to be able to do. I want something where I can just point and click and be able to create my skyscraper.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of different comps, and I think aspirations people have mentioned in the Discord. We already talked about the Ready Player One example that Shane himself has used multiple times. And you know, what I picture in my head may be different than other people, but I love the idea of basically like a Sims type dropping of buildings that I could then modify. But it's relatively easy to start with, say, like the base model of the building. I think I'm using that term right. But, you know, something where I could get started and then sort of customize from there.
Yeah, I think that is what I think many of us are hoping for. I know I'm personally hoping for that same thing. I think a proprietary builder is kind of, I mean, obviously it's important for keeping people inside your platform, which is important. And I think it'll make things more cohesive. Obviously ease of use is extremely important. And something like The Sims, which is exactly what I was thinking of, makes the most sense logically. You know, give them basic objects to create with, and then the ability to customize those objects or the attributes of those objects, whether it be skins or size, scale, positioning, etc. There's a lot that can be done with a small amount of assets. So,
yeah, and Kangy recently got me hooked on a game called Valheim. He hasn't played it with me yet, but I've been playing it, and it actually has a integrated builder in their game, and it utilizes the resources that you gather in the game, and something like that would work very well with an Earth 2 type.
Yeah, and when that came out too, that was actually, I think it was released in like December. So the timing of it actually lined up quite well with when a lot of people were getting into Earth 2. And that was a commonly cited game that people wanted to sort of see elements incorporated from into Earth 2. So I think that if, you know, the devs were in the general chat around that time, hopefully they picked up on, because I saw dozens of folks say something like that. So I would love to see at least some of those recommendations sort of integrated into the game. And I think it'll happen. I feel pretty optimistic with just the sheer number of resources they plan to utilize, that they'll be looking to other games to sort of for inspiration.
Yeah, and Wolfgang's worked on these type of games that utilize a lot of resources and builders before, so I really think that's the direction they're going to head.
Yeah, and one benefit too, so we talked a little bit about the idea of using, you know, proprietary engine versus a third-party engine where things are maybe a little bit more pre-baked. And, you know, what are the pros and cons of those? So I think we can start with, you know, some of the benefits of a proprietary engine would be, you get to, I mean, that's full flexibility, right? You're fully designing that from the ground up, and you can put in it whatever you want. You can provide, you know, for the users whatever goals you have in mind, but that might take a lot of time and money, right?
Yep.
So, you know, and we've seen sort of the level of patience or lack thereof within the community. So when I think about the implications of a proprietary engine, it sounds great, and I love the flexibility, but I do have a feeling that where possible, they're going to be looking to third parties to, you know, be able to speed this up and get it to market more quickly. But what do you both think about that? And this time I'll do it properly. Batman, what are your opinions on this?
I really think that I don't think a third party is going to work here. I think it has to be in game. I think it has to be something they develop. Now, maybe they hire a third party to develop the system and then integrate it into the game, but I don't think it's going to be a third party independent of Earth 2. It has to be something that they hire to develop
specifically with Earth 2 in mind.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. I do think that if they try to use third-party applications, they're going to run into the issue of parameters, because you can do a lot more in something like Unity or Unreal than you're probably going to be able to do in Earth 2. So you risk people, you know, exceeding build parameters, build limits. Those are a lot harder to implement. And then you introduce the concept of having to review something that someone wants to import in from that third party, and that creates a whole new bottleneck I think, when it comes to implementing anything or getting something into the platform, because then you've created this new review process where you have to take something from one platform and bring it into another. So it definitely makes a lot of sense for them to create something proprietary where they can implement all of their constraints that they need from the get-go. All the parameters are there. Any build limitations that need to be in place can all be wrapped up into something that the user just sees as a user interface where they can do something or can't do something, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
for
ahead.
sure. And I was going to no, go ahead.
I was just
transition, so
that point that Combo made was really interesting, because thinking about build parameters and sort of when we did the dev chat in December, and some of the follow-up indicated that there might be buildings you want to put on your property that are a bit too large. Say you can't put a football stadium on like a 2-tile lot, right? You need something larger to begin with in order to place that. And then I also think about some of the plots that are really disjointed or oddly shaped, and how difficult that might be to work with if they used a third-party developer, just because you're inheriting so many strange plots that that could be an added sort of difficulty. But that was just one brain dripping I wanted to get out there before I let Batman transition us to the next topic.
No, that's actually a great point, Kangy. And what I wanted to talk about, my alter ego Bruce Wayne, he likes money, and we all like money. It's one of the reasons we're playing R2, for the income opportunity. So what are some ways, Combo, that we can make money using a proprietary building application?
Well, it's a good question. For starters, I think it's going to depend on the complexity and the depth that we get when it comes to building. And I think that'll change with time. It'll evolve with time, as most good things do, most platforms do. I do definitely see the entertainment space being key. Personally, I'm a huge music fan. So one of my goals is to create a music venue where we can have live stream performances. I think it'd be really neat to go into a virtual club with your friends, maybe pay a cover fee, something like that, and be able to watch an exclusive live performance of maybe even a large artist, So
right. So designing your property
exactly.
to be like a music venue.
And I think that's just one example. I think there's a lot of things that people can do. I think it's just going to be about creativity. And as there's more platforms that can be integrated and more things that can be done, whether it be hosting NFTs in a showroom or a YouTube video or a live stream, I think as those mediums expand and there's more content to create and host, the opportunity is just going to be endless.
Yeah, one of the ideals I had, how people could make money, is selling their designs. Maybe some people don't have the creativity to build a music venue or to build a skyscraper, but maybe someone is really good at it, and they can design the property for you, and you pay them.
I definitely would be a person that's not particularly skilled. I just know ahead of time I'm not going to be sort of great at implementing my vision to some of my properties. But if I've got something in mind, and in some cases I might be using some slice of life inspiration, like the music venue example. Maybe you've got a music venue in your hometown you'd like to recreate. If somebody out there is really good at doing those kinds of things, you could sort of commission them to, hey, can you replicate this venue from my hometown? Here's a few pictures. Here's where I want to put it, because I would absolutely be interested in doing that. And there's so many, knowing that there's so many buildings and landmarks and things people have bought, knowing that they're going to be wiped out. I'm sure there's going to be folks that want to kind of replicate what used to be there.
Yep.
Given your background, Combo, I imagine you're going to do most of your own creation.
Yes, absolutely. I'm already conceptualizing some things well ahead of time, just because I want to be ready when building comes online, and so I can get a jump start on some of those things. So I have some big plans, but I think part of it is creating the ideas and the brand and the whole concept ahead of time, so that when that's rolled out, it's time to put in action.
We always joke about my Armenian casino empire, but that's the concept I have planned, and we're talking about I don't know whether it's going to be allowed. If it's not, I'm going to have to turn to some other avenue. But my vision is to have casinos that were really poker rooms, because poker is my background, and to have high-end poker rooms to where people can sit down virtually and play poker like they would online. And, creating a high-end casino poker room is really what I have it pictured in my head. And I have plans for everything, ranging from EPLs, how I'm going to place the buildings and everything. So like thinking ahead on instances like that, I think it's a good idea, because this is basically something that you're going to be able to generate revenue if you
right. If you've got the right ideas, you'll definitely be able to take full advantage. And I think both of you have brought up really interesting concepts, because being in the pandemic, being locked down, going to a casino or a music venue is either not very easy or completely impossible. So like I've had multiple concerts that I had bought tickets to like over a year ago that are now pushed into 2022. Well, if that could be attended remotely for a lower cost as well, then that could be a great opportunity to generate some added revenue. And casinos, same thing. Not necessarily easy to go to the casino right now, but I could go to virtual Armenia and lose some money on free card poker real quick. Yes,
I am happy to
sure
take your money.
You are, and I'm ready to lose it. I'm enthusiastic about losing it.
What if you had a bunch of those, like, how they have the sticker machines at like the convenience stores? What if you had like an NFT slot machine?
Oh my God, that's you're quite literally printing money at that point.
Yeah, you have a bunch of like commons in there, and then you have a couple of rares that you have a chance at.
Yeah, so like
there you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think about the little when those little collectible homies were popular that you could get out of those machines. It'd be that type of thing, and you're like, well, the wheelchair homie, he costs a little bit more. He's a little bit more rare. So
exactly.
It absolutely could be, yet another thing that could be worked in, so long as obviously the in-game engine actually allows for that kind of thing.
Right.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
Right. So what are some of the potential problems we're going to have as they work towards this? What are, like, we already seen some server issues with the UAE release. Do you think having 100,000 people on the server at one time trying to build skyscrapers is going to cause server issues? It's obviously something they're going to have
to
I
mean, I'm definitely very worried about server stability. I would think by the time that we're actually able to enter a true metaverse that type of thing would be resolved. I would hope it would be. But I also realize that an in-game metaverse is going to be a lot more demanding than a simple sort of land trading platform. So yeah, that's got to be, because if you have people lose faith in the metaverse early, they're not going to want to keep trying to go into it. So the server's got to be in good shape before they allow us to actually, enter that world.
Yep, I 100% agree. I think server stability will be number one, and I think number two, the second hurdle will probably be just where technology is as a whole, because we're going to need to be to a certain point technologically for this to be adopted in mass. So I do think that is very important. Although, personally, I think Earth 2 is doing this at just the right time, where everything is kind of coming together at just the right time. But it will really depend on where everything is. Augmented reality glasses, how much virtual reality has been adopted, and things like that. So I could see that being one of the bigger hurdles.
Right, and I'm curious how a property that is developed on the game will actually display in the game.
And we don't know that at all yet. So
yeah, because if there's no sort of property development tools within the VR space ahead of time, then you're going to be building in sort of one medium and then experiencing it in a totally different one. So, and to Combo's point too, that's a very, very good point about where the technology's at, because right now I think that VR technology and headsets are still probably pretty cost prohibitive for most people. It's a pretty expensive investment for especially a more casual gamer. So hopefully by the time we're really in sort of our phase 3 and phase 4 of the release here, by then we have headsets that are only maybe $150, $200.
I think that's the hope. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, or even less. Yeah, I mean, could be like, I mean, just think about technology over the years. Everything goes down in price. I mean, you can get a TV now for $400 that would have cost you
exactly. Yeah, there's
5 years ago.
some 42-inch plasma screen TVs that cost people about 20 times back when they were purchased than they would cost today. So, yeah, that's a good point.
I think on the flip side of that is also just the possibility that some of those things might not change so much in price. They just may become more required or more desirable if we started to transition to where phones were wearables rather than phones. I think that people would be more okay spending $800 or $1,000 on an augmented reality headset if it was also their phone. So I think there could be a transition there in what we consider
for sure.
Almost a necessity.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And I hope that that's the case. If we increase sort of the necessity for it, then it's just going to be such a much easier pathway to get more people into the game. If you've already got the tech, right, then the jump to actually participating is going to be much, much lower.
Right. And I think that's what we saw with Pokemon Go was people already had the phones. All they had to do was download the app and your phone could do it. And that's why it was so incredibly popular, because it exploded. Everyone could do it. There was no access boundary. It was just you were in. So
yeah, and that's what Earth 2 needs to do. They need to have no access.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, I think they're you can only do so much in terms of making sure you come out at the right time. And I do think they very much are coming out at the right time. If you look at the space, I mean, Snapchat, Facebook, Apple, they're all working on, some sort of augmented reality device. And that's promising because those are, especially Apple, that's a company that you can expect to roll something out that may end up being a replacement for a phone. So, I mean, those are definitely things that we should be paying attention to, obviously, as Earth 2 early adopters.
Well, on that note, I mean, I think that one thing I also wanted to kind of transition into, since we're talking about what it means to be an early adopter, is kind of what some of the competitors are frankly doing in that early adopter space. So one of our most famous, one of Earth2.io's most famous competitors, vPark, has sort of introduced the concept of royalties for stamped land, which would allow the user who had originally purchased the land to continue to profit from the land that they've stamped as it's sold and sold again. So really an interesting concept, thinking about, we were just talking about these alternative income streams, right? And how that would allow for an early investor to continue to make more money. So Combo, do you want to talk a little bit about this introduction from vPark and, what you like about it, what you don't like, whether you'd want to see Earth 2 do some things like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea itself is great in practicality, especially when you look at things outside of virtual land. It's definitely something that already happens in the NFT space. When it comes to minting an NFT, a lot of NFT applications, I believe all of them, have some sort of royalty that's handed down to the initial creator of the piece of work. So that's what I first think of when I hear this concept. But my only concern with it is that the land itself it's just land at this very moment, and it doesn't have as much potential as it could. And so until it has some sort of potential, until there's some uniqueness to it, until something exists on it that maybe the original creator or owner built, I could understand that maybe carrying more weight and more royalty long term. But in the tile sense, because we all know, we've been in Earth 2 for a while now, we know that there's very little past the tile experience. And so I don't know if there's enough intrinsic value in the tiles alone to make it make sense.
Get up off your knees. please go. Stand face to face with your God.